What happens when the words, "I'm so proud of you," have secretly meant you finally caught up for 11 straight years, and nobody noticed except you? I told my sister exactly what I thought of her on Christmas Day. 11 people sat at that table. My mother, both aunts, 3 cousins, her husband, and her 2 children, ages 7 and 9, close enough to hear every word. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, today's the day. But something she said was the same thing she'd been saying for 11 years in 100 different disguises, and something in me that had been holding on for that long simply let go. My sister Renee is 3 years older than me. For most of my adult life, I thought our dynamic was just how sisters were, until my therapist asked me to describe it from the outside. I described it. Then I sat in silence in her office, because the outside view was nothing like the one I'd been living inside. From the outside, Renee was the one who did everything right, in the right order, at the right time, and had been praised for it her whole life. She turned that 3-year head start into a permanent measuring stick. Never cruel, never loud, always warm, the warmth of someone who saw herself as generous, always ready to share her superior vantage point with someone still catching up. Unsolicited advice. Concern dressed as questions. A way of asking how things were going that quietly implied they could be going better, if only I did it her way. For 11 years, I told myself it wasn't that big a deal. She loved me. She meant well. I used those true things to bury what it actually felt like sitting across from her, like someone perpetually being evaluated and occasionally passing. When I got engaged, I called her from the parking lot, ring still on my finger. She screamed with real joy and then said, "I'm so glad you finally found your person." Finally. I was 31. I'd had 1 relationship before Tom, 2 years single after it, and during those years, Renee had used that word finally more than once, never seeming to understand what it implied, that my life had been paused, waiting to catch up to hers. At my wedding, she gave a maid of honor speech that got real laughs from the whole room, and then said word for word, because I wrote it down that night, "Watching my little sister grow into the woman standing here today has been the greatest privilege of my life." I was so worried about her for so long, but she got there. She really got there. I was 32, 7 years into a career I loved. A therapist, a home, friendships that survived my 20s. I had gotten somewhere. Just not on Renee's schedule, in Renee's order, by Renee's standard. Her speech described someone who'd finally arrived after taking too long, and the whole room felt relieved for me. I called my therapist the next week. She asked how it landed. I said, like being patted on the head by someone who'd spent 32 years standing slightly taller than me. She asked what it cost me. I said it cost me the feeling of existing in my own right whenever I was in the same room as my sister. I want to be fair to Renee. She wasn't malicious. She'd grown up in the same house I had, with a mother who valued achievement above almost everything, and Renee learned that lesson earliest and best. She built a framework as a child, achievement is how you matter, and applied it to everyone, including me, so consistently for so long that she had no idea she was doing it. That's the fair version. It doesn't change 11 years at that table. This Christmas, at my parents' house, the morning was wonderful. Renee's kids were thrilled with their gifts. We had a genuinely good conversation about work, about her kids' lives. By the standards of our relationship, a good morning. Then at dinner, my cousin Jessie announced a promotion after only 6 months. The table lit up with congratulations. Renee said warmly, "That's wonderful, Jessie, and you've always been the type who makes things happen quickly." A compliment. Jessie took it as one. I received it differently. The way I'd been involuntarily receiving Renee's compliments for 11 years. Embedded inside it, doing things quickly is what makes them admirable, which means doing things slowly or differently is less so. I told myself it wasn't about me. I breathed. Christmas continued. Then my mother asked how our house search was going. 8 months in, patient and deliberate by design. Renee said gently, hand around her wine glass. "Oh, I know what you mean. It takes the time it takes. You just want to make sure you're ready when the right one comes along." She'd bought her house at 28, married at 29, kids at 31 and 33. Good facts about her life. Facts I was genuinely glad about. But in this family, at this table, they had always been the standard against which my different timeline was measured. And "you just want to make sure you're ready" was the exact same sentence as "I'm so glad you finally found your person." The exact same sentence as "she got there." She really got there. 11 years of the same sentence, delivered in the same warm voice of someone who'd been measuring so long it felt like breathing. Something in my chest just let go. I put down my fork. Tom looked at me. He knew. "Renee, I need to say something, Renee, and I need to say it here because I've been not saying it for 11 years, and I don't want to not say it for another 11. The table went silent. I told her, with love, not against it, that for 11 years, Every piece of encouragement she'd given me had contained a hidden comparison between where I was and where she'd already been. Never explicit. Always present. "I'm so glad you finally found your person" wasn't a celebration. It was a comment on my timeline. "She got there, she really got there" wasn't a tribute at my own wedding. It was a verdict. "You just want to make sure you're ready" wasn't wisdom. It was the same thing it had always been. Her standing slightly above me, looking down with warmth and good intentions, and the unexamined assumption that her way was the measure for mine. Renee said, "I have never once compared you to me." I said, "I know you don't think you have." That's exactly what's made this impossible to say for 11 years. You can't point to one sentence and call it hurtful, because each one sounds fine alone. It's only the accumulation from the inside that shows you the shape of it. She said she'd spent her whole life being proud of me. I said, "I know, but pride from a height is still from a height." She needed time. She went upstairs for 20 minutes, then came back and said she wasn't going to respond tonight. She didn't want to give me something inadequate on Christmas Day. She said she'd heard me. She hugged me at the door, a real hug, longer than usual, and left. That was 6 weeks ago. We hadn't spoken since. My mother asked gently if there was room for grace. Hadn't Renee not known what she was doing? I said grace and silence aren't the same thing, and I'd been offering silence for 11 years while she asked for grace. I wasn't conflating them anymore. My father texted that he was glad I'd said it, and sorry it had taken this long for there to be space for it. He told me he'd watched this pattern for years and chosen silence, which he now believed was the wrong choice. My cousin Matt said he'd noticed the same pattern from the outside for years and never known how to name it. He said, "You've never seemed like someone still climbing the hill to me." I said, "That's because you were watching me, not Renee." In February, Tom and I found our house. Wrong neighborhood, right everything else. We made an offer. It was accepted. I told everyone, except Renee. Then, after 2 days, I sent her a photo of the front door. No message. She replied within 10 minutes. "It's beautiful. I'm so happy for you. Then, can we talk?" She called that night. She'd been seeing a therapist twice since Christmas, specifically because of what I'd said. The therapist had asked her to describe our relationship from the outside. She said it was uncomfortable. She said, "I don't think I knew I was doing it." I said, "I know." That was the first thing I said at the table. She said, "Knowing I didn't know and understanding what I was doing anyway, those aren't the same thing." The therapist helped me see the difference. She said she'd been angry at first and wanted to be honest about that. But underneath the anger was the recognition that 11 years was a long time for someone she loved to have been receiving something she never knew she was sending. I told her what I needed, to be seen as someone who exists in my own right, not as a point on a line that started where hers did. She said she'd keep working on understanding what that meant. She said, "I've been doing it wrong for a long time." I said, "Yes, and you're doing something different now, and that's worth more than the wrong done right." We've talked twice since. Careful, tentative, two people relearning the sound of each other without the old structure underneath. It's not the relationship it's going to become yet. It's the beginning of finding out what it will be. My therapist asked in January if I regretted Christmas. I regretted the venue, the children at the table, my mother having to manage it, the cousins shepherding kids to the kitchen for extra dessert. I did not regret the words. I'd spent 11 years waiting for the right moment. And the right moment always has the same flaw every moment eventually has. Something makes the true thing inconvenient. I simply ran out of inconvenient moments. This one arrived, and I used it. Some true things can only be said once you've run out of reasons not to. You spend years collecting those reasons. The reasons are real. And eventually, the reasons are all the years become. Then something lets go. You say it. The room goes still. The children go to the kitchen. And the silence that follows is the hardest, most honest silence you've ever sat in. And on the other side of it, something becomes possible that wasn't possible before. Because the true thing is finally in the room with both of you. And you can both finally see it. 6 weeks of silence. That's true. But the silence isn't absence. It isn't the end. It's the quiet of two people who finally said something real to each other for the first time in 11 years, and are figuring out, together, what real sounds like now that they know it's possible. That's more than I had before I put my fork down.